My name's Axel. I was made in 1987. I'll be your tour guide. Now, what are some things you notice about the outside of this train?
Shiny.
Shiny, absolutely right. Now that is a very big deal because this train was made with stainless steel. It's going to be very durable, it's going to be very strong, it's not going to rust, and this is a very scientific way to put it, it just looked really cool. This shiny outside, the ribbing too, the kind of snub nose, that was part of a design choice called streamlining. It really took off in the 1930s, due in large part to the success of this train. Have you ever seen a toaster with ridges like that or a vacuum with curves like that? It's not an accident. Not to mention, this is still what the future looks like today. Very sleek and very shiny. Now, something you might notice this train doesn't have, there's no smokestack. That's because this was a diesel-electric engine. It didn't burn coal. It had a diesel engine that powered an electric motor to keep this train moving. Now, about 90% of that electricity went towards moving the train, and the other 10% went back into the train. Things like electricity and electric lights and refrigeration. Now, in just a second, we're going to head on inside, but before we do, I want to point out that this is the actual Pioneer Zephyr, same train that was on the rails back in 1934. Over the course of its life, there was one passenger car added to it. Unfortunately, we don't have that car. It was lost in a rail yard accident. She was like this when we got her, I promise. That being said, we'll head on in, and be sure to watch your head. If you're over 4 feet tall or right about here on me, you are too tall for this door.
In your lap before you do it. Back in the early days of the Pioneer Zephyr.
Alright, no grab your boarding passes, right? Pick it up.
So the train was safer to ride on than it would be now.
Yeah, it kind of looks like without ducking. It's cooler. Yeah, it is. Nice joke. Nice joke.
It seems like a strange question, but it's a good place to start. Suppose everyone in the 1930s was this short and this wide. Now, this wasn't a people door. The front half of this train carried mail. If you get a chance to check it out, we've got the letter sorting room on the other side of that wall. A trap door right down there for anything bigger than letters, and anything bigger than that trap door, right through the side door here. Now, to understand why this train was important, you've got to understand where it came from. It was built in the 1930s. When we talk about the 1930s in America, what are some things you think of?
Depression.
Depression, absolutely right. You've got the Great Depression, you've got the Dust Bowl, you've got organized crime, you've got Prohibition. It's not the happiest decade to be alive. The folks at the CB&Q, the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy, wanted to change that. They wanted to give people hope for the future. They wanted to get people excited again. And to be completely honest, they wanted to sell train tickets. Now, just by a show of hands, who took some kind of motor vehicle to the museum today? Car, bus, cab, anything like that? Now, in the 1930s, that wasn't really an option. Cars were a lot more expensive and a lot less reliable. Roads were a lot more expensive and a lot less reliable. Not to mention, if you wanted to go long distances, the interstate and highway system didn't even exist yet. Now, who's ever flown on a plane before? Now, who's ever flown a plane before? All right. Now, other than if you weren't in the pilot seat, you probably weren't going to be flying. Weren't going to be on a plane in the 1930s. Commercial air travel didn't exist yet. So if you wanted to go long distances and get there pretty quick, trains were the way to do it. Now, unfortunately, the Great Depression kind of put a stop to that too. In the 1920s, about 18 million Americans every year were riding trains. In the 1930s, only about 8 million were. So the CB&Q wanted to get people excited again. It was going to do that with the Pioneer Zephyr. The Zephyr was going to break 2 world records. It was going to go from Denver, Colorado to Chicago, Illinois to kick off the second year of the Century of Progress World's Fair. It was going to be the longest continual train ride, and they were aiming for the fastest train ride too. For a dawn to dusk ride from Denver to Chicago. We'll be talking about that a little bit more in the baggage car. Because the front half did people, back half did, front half did mail, back half did people, and the baggage car split the difference. Come right on. Now, I don't mean to spoil the suspense, but the Zephyr did succeed in both of those world records on its dawn to dusk ride. It traveled just over 1,000 miles, averaged about 77 miles an hour, and topped out at just about 115 miles an hour in the Great Plains. Managed to make it from Denver to Chicago in just 13 hours and 5 minutes. Never had to drive from Denver to Chicago, but it's still an incredible time. Not to mention for a steam train, that entire trip would have taken about 26 hours. They cut the time nearly in half. Now the folks in Denver wanted to make sure the folks in Chicago didn't get all the credit for it, so they sent along a mascot, a Rocky Mountain Canary. You can actually meet him if you'd like. Hey Zeph, come on out. Watch out.
Okay, more company. Here we go again. Welcome to the baggage car.
Now, he's
I'm
real
Zeph
old.
the Burrow,
It's
your
pretty
host
gentle.
while you're here. Yeah, I can talk. What's so darn strange about that? Okay, let's just cut to the chase. Why am I on this train? Well, only yesterday I was roaming the Denver hillsides with my buddies, minding my own business, just enjoying the day. That's me there on the 11th. Then, all of a sudden, whoop, I'm blasted from behind by this big old 10-gallon hat. Well, right off I put up a fight, because how could I know who was tugging at the other end of that lasso? Could be some fool prospector wants me to help him dig for gold, or the boss of a Burrow chain gang looking for young blood for his team. Or worst of all, some miner looking to send me below ground for the rest of my life. Anyway, life was about to change, and how? I didn't know it then, but I was about to become the luckiest Burrow on the face of the earth. Because when we get to Denver, it's not some crazy prospector. It's not the mining camps. No. I'm presented in a ceremony to Mr. Ralph Budd of the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad. Flashbulbs popping, everyone cheering. I see Mr. Budd wink to the news reporters. Then he says, "Nice to meet you, Zeph. Guess one more jackass on this trip won't make any difference." I was thinking, huh? I couldn't see any other Burrows around, just me. And hey, what trip's he talking about? And why is he calling me Zeph? Well, that's when I see the train. Woo-wee, what a beauty! Turns out I was drug off my hillside to be the mascot for this dawn to dusk run from Denver to Chicago. And the name of the train I was to ride on? You got it, the Burlington Zephyr. Now, why couldn't they have told me that in the first place?
Well, Zeph, they probably didn't know you could talk. Now, to be able to make those record-breaking runs, this train just had to be built different. It's actually a lot lighter than a steam train. The whole train only weighed about 100 tons. May not sound like much, but for a steam train, just the coal car and the engine would have weighed 300 tons.
Yeah? Well, what about that curve back there in Colorado?
Getting there, now what Zeph is a little salty about is this train was built with a lower center of gravity. It could just take turns tighter. It didn't have to slow down. Now, there was one turn in Colorado that took a little too tight and Zeph's crate did tip over. You were fine though, he was fine. The reporter he landed on, a little less so.
Yeah, I suppose you're right. And I guess it's only another 4 hours or so to the Windy City.
Now Zeph is right and he's going to talk for the next 4 hours too. So we're going to head on into the next car, right this way.
That's where the Zephyr's going to be exhibited after this run. Hey, maybe I'll get on the rides for free since I'm the Zephyr's mascot. Then after the fair, I'm going to see Chicago. Bright lights, big city, and it's out to the country, where I hope to be a good-looking part.
Yeah, come on in and have a seat, folks.
The horse is back there.
We should sit there.
Donkey's not.
All right. And welcome to the smoking car. I'll give you one guess what they did in here.
They smoked.
Right. I also would have accepted eaten or drank. They prepare the food in that kitchen back there, that tiny, tiny kitchen. Then they'd bring the food in, they'd bring the tables in, and they'd serve you. You see the hooks off to your side? It's actually where the tables would sit. When they were done, they'd just take everything away. Now, pretty much everything in this car was a very big deal, including the electric lights. It may not seem like much now, but it took that diesel electric engine to have that electricity to keep those lights running. Now, they could also power the refrigerator and freezer back there. That was important because that meant this was the first train to ever serve its passengers ice cream. It also meant it was important because this was the first train to ever have air conditioning. Now, that is very important because these windows don't actually open. They were designed that way. The idea was, if you open those windows, it would cause a little too much drag and it would slow the train down. But it was also for bragging rights, because if you're on a steam train with those windows open, all that smoke and all that soot from that smokestack could come right back down through those windows and onto you. So being able to keep those closed and travel in comfort was a very big deal. Now, on top of that, you've got radiator heating right down there. It's a little harder to see, but you've got radio service for the entire trip too. And, as weird as it sounds, the leather seats were a big deal too. This was the smoking part. So if you fell asleep with the cigar still lit, this was a safety feature. Leather's going to light on fire a lot less than cloth, so you don't have to worry about burning the entire train down. And talking about falling asleep, something you might notice this train doesn't have, there's no sleeping car. That's because the entire time this train was active, 1934 all the way up until 1960, it only did day trips. There was never need for one. So they left the car off, kept the weight down, and kept the speed up. Now, I asked about cars and I asked about planes before. Who's ever been on a long-distance train ride? I see a couple hands up. Now, it doesn't come up too much these days. Things have started to shift. In 1960, when this train retired, things were really starting to change. Money that had gone towards the railroads was going towards interstate and highway building. Cars were a lot cheaper and a lot more reliable, so more people could have them. And they started building airports. If you ever had to drive from Denver to Chicago, 13 hours and 5 minutes is still an incredible time. If you ever had to fly from Denver to Chicago, it takes about 2.5 hours. So there are faster options, but we keep this train around because it's an important part of history. Everything in here was incredibly cutting edge in the 30s. Not to mention, this was one of the first times people had really asked how to travel in style and comfort at the same time. Now, the next stop is first class, all the way at the end of the train. And to get there, we'd have to go through the passenger car. You'll hear a few people talking about one of the more exciting incidents of the Dawn to Dusk ride. One of the power cables that kept this train going was cut in half when someone closed the door on it. Now, luckily, one of the electricians, Roy Baer, picked up both halves of those cables, jammed them together, and was able to save the record-breaking run. Unfortunately, he was dealing with electrical cables with his bare hands, so he did get burnt pretty badly. But there was a doctor on board who could help him out.
I felt the train slow down. Didn't we almost stop?
Did you see Mr. Bud run up to the engine?
Be too bad for folks like me if this train is changed. Excuse me. I think I can straighten this out. I know what happened because I traded the poor fellow back in Colorado. Someone slammed the
The
door.
owner of the CB&Q and the Zephyr, too. The owner of the CB&Q.
Come on in, folks. Welcome to the Observation Lounge. Pleased to meet you. I'm Ralph Budd.
Mommy, look, we're going over a bridge.
And these are my friends, Mrs. Catherine Wilder and her daughter, Abigail.
Hello? Abby, say hello.
Hello.
Really, Ralph, do you think it's a good idea having all these scruffy people come in here? They don't really look like first-class passengers.
Catherine, I think it'll be just fine. They all seem very well behaved. They just want the best view of the Zephyr's run.
Well, I do hope you're right, Ralph. But they really should know. All you visitors, please be aware that this is a first-class car, and you should all appreciate Mr. Bud sharing it with you today.
Mommy, now look.
What now, dear?
Can't you see? We're about to go through a town.
Can you see the crossing guards out along the tracks, Abby? They're to make sure the Zephyr doesn't have any accidents today.
Where are they? I can't see them.
I agree, Abby. It is difficult to see the landscape. In some ways, Ralph, don't you think it's almost a shame the Zephyr moves so quickly?
Ah, but Catherine, in the 20th century, the race goes to the swift. The railroad simply must keep up.
Mommy, now we're passing a car. They can't keep up with us.
Amazing. The Zephyr is safer, more comfortable, and even faster than our finest automobiles.
I hope all our former passengers figure that out. What do you folks think?
Gentlemen, I know it may be surprising.
Ladies and
but
gentlemen,
it's actually
pleased
still
to report that the
2015,
Burlington Zephyr
and we
has
are
just arrived in Chicago,
Thank you
having
very
set
much for
new
coming.
world records for the fastest and longest non-stop run in history.
It's cute.
Fireworks, hooray!
Wonderful.
Magical.
There's certainly no better welcome than fireworks after a triumph like this.
So, Uncle Ralph, was the Zephyr fast enough?
Yes, Abby, we made tremendous time. The trip took only 13 hours and 5 minutes. We cut the regular travel time from Denver to Chicago almost in half.
Really, Ralph, well done. That's a splendid record.
Hooray for the Zephyr! And congratulations, Uncle
Thanks for
Ralph.
coming through, folks.
Thank you, Abby. And now that the Burlington Zephyr is
Thanks, it was fun.
You're walking this way. And go back.